G'day everyone, it's Cam here from First Brick Property Buyers Agency. I just thought I'd do a quick update today regarding the landlords and tenants and what's happening in New South Wales, because there is a bit of movement, there's a bit going on at the moment, similar to what happened in Queensland a couple of weeks ago. So essentially what's happened is there's a campaign led by the Real Estate Institute New South Wales, and it's pretty much commenced to highlight the potential imbalance between the way landlords and tenants are being treated in the state of New South Wales. So the REI in New South Wales, the REI NSW, has set up a campaign called Everyone Matters, which is very similar to what happened in Brisbane and Queensland, and it's to help concerned landlords have a voice in this debate and hopefully to have the legislation amended to be fairer for all. So again, very similar to what's already happened up north in Queensland. So I'll quickly summarize what the campaign is about and what they want landlords to discuss with the New South Wales government. And essentially, there's not a lot of time because the Parliament is due to sit tomorrow and discuss this. So if you are a landlord and you think any of this is maybe a benefit for you, we'll explain at the end how you can get in touch and what you can do to try and have your voice heard. But essentially, what the campaign is for, in short, landlords are calling on the government to review and amend the regulation to account for the following matters. Number one, an obligation imposed on the tenant to exhaust all avenues of government assistance prior to seeking a rent reduction. So at the moment, rent reductions and how it works with the tenants, it's a bit more lax. You just pretty much have to say that you're having difficulties making your rent repayments. You may have lost your job or whatever, and that's pretty much it. But what they're asking for here is an obligation imposed to exhaust all avenues of government assistance before reducing the rent. They also want to amend the definition of impacted tenant to include an additional requirement that the tenant does not have access to unencumbered liquid funds in all the circumstances sufficient to pay the rent. It is unjust that a tenant with enough funds to pay rent is excused from doing so because they have lost their job. So essentially, this point is saying, well, if the tenant's got $180,000 sitting in their bank account and they've lost their job and their rent is $400 a week, that has to be looked into as well, and they can't just get a rent reduction. So they're looking at a holistic approach rather than just, oh, you lost your job, you get rent reduction immediately, and the landlord has to face the consequences of that. So they're more of a holistic approach on that one. Second thing is to introduce a definition of an impacted landlord. So at the moment we just have impacted tenant, but they want to introduce the definition for impacted landlord and provide protections to the class of landlord. To do otherwise simply passes the financial stress of the tenant to the landlord, who is already in financial stress themselves due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So they just want to have that landlord part established as well to see if they can help the landlords. As we know, most property investors own one property. Most of property investors are mum and dad investors. So they're not people sitting with millions and millions of dollars in their accounts. People like me and you, just property investors, have one or two houses. And the overwhelming majority, over 80%, only have the one property. So if they've been affected through their job as well, they're probably having trouble paying for their mortgage. And if the rent reduces, it's going to cause a domino effect. So that's why they want to have a definition for the impacted landlord. Next thing is they want to introduce clear guidelines setting out which documents the tenant must provide to the landlord as part of the application for a rental reduction. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's currently very opaque. It's not clear on what needs to happen for tenants and for landlords if there is an application for a rental reduction. So they want some clear guidelines around that. The fourth point here is introduce a requirement for tenants to provide evidence of attempts to mitigate the landlord's loss caused by a rental reduction. So again, what they're trying to achieve here is just not putting the entire burden and the entire responsibility on the landlord. Fifth point is introduce a standard requirement for tenants to substantiate a rent reduction request to allow landlords to make a properly informed and fair decision. Point number 6, introduce a requirement and make it clear that a tenant must continue to satisfy the criteria of an impacted tenant, not just at the beginning when they request a rental reduction, as appears to be the popular interpretation. And then point number 7, or in summary, essentially, these measures will help ensure that those tenants who can pay their way under the contract they agree to do, and those that can't get the appropriate support to help them through this difficult period will have support. So it's not about having landlords up here and tenants down here or other way around. It's just trying to make a bit more of a fairer situation for everyone. Essentially, if you want a rent reduction, you're going to have to prove that you need the rent reduction. You're not just going to be able to get one, which is a fair situation, so people are not taking advantage of the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic. So PICA, the Property Investors Council of Australia, strongly supports this initiative, and they encourage you to act by sending a letter to the Premier of New South Wales, and you can follow the instructions on the website reinsw.com.au/everyone matters. So if you're a landlord in New South Wales and you think the current legislation or the current rules are a bit unfair, more favoured towards the tenant, or they just seem to be not the best in your interest, go onto that website, send a letter. It's pre-filled already. It's the same tactic that has had great success in reducing the burden on landlords with the Queensland campaign. So in Queensland, in one night, the Queensland Premier and Housing Minister received 300,000 emails, thereabouts, from landlords. So it was very obvious that the situation in Queensland was not fair. It was very tilted towards the tenants, and it just made it a much fairer game when they revised and they looked at it. So the tenants weren't worse off. It just made it fairer for everyone. So as I mentioned, Parliament is set to sit tomorrow, Tuesday, 12th of May 2020. So if you are a New South Wales landlord and you are interested in getting onto this, I'll put a link in the comments and the description so you can get involved. But yeah, just a bit of a summary of what's happening at the moment in New South Wales regarding landlords and tenants. If you like the video, or if you want me to discuss something else in the property world, feel free to just comment or send us a message, and we'll happily create a video for that as well. Have a good day, guys. Take care.